Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are located. Welcome to today's Scrum Pulse. I'm Lindsay Valesina with Scrum.org, and I will be moderating today's session. And today we have professional Scrum trainer Simon Flossmann, along with Christian Hoftstetter here to talk with us about unlocking the secrets of successful Scrum teams, navigating conflict with team toxins. So we're going to go through practice here that can help you with resolving conflicts and navigating those conflicts within a team. So with that, can you please go to the next slide, Simon, so I can let everybody know how we're collecting Q&A. So you'll notice that your microphone is muted. However, we will have time for Q&A at the end of this session. So please enter those questions into the Q&A box. If you have any technical questions, feel free to, technology questions, feel free to drop those into the chat box and I will work with you on that. But we want to keep all of the questions in the Q&A, so please do that. And this session is being recorded and the recording and slides will be available within 24 hours. You will get a link in your inbox. Next slide, please. Okay, so just a little bit about Scrum.org. We are the home of Scrum. We were founded by Ken Schwaber in 2009. Our mission is to help people and teams solve complex problems, and we do so through our professional Scrum training, certification, and our ongoing learning opportunities. You'll notice on our website there are a lot of free opportunities to learn. We have a lot of free resources, including webinars like this one, and I hope that today's session plays a role in that learning journey for you. So with that, I will hand it over to you both to introduce yourselves and get us started.
Hello everyone, my name is Simon. I'm a professional Scrum trainer with Scrum.org since 2019. I started my career as a product owner. Basically, I was hired as a developer, but after a couple of weeks, I worked as a product owner. And after that, I worked for years as a Scrum Master, and I also a former steward of the professional scaled Scrum class at Scrum.org. And today I'm a PST teaching classes and helping clients to succeed with Scrum.
Hi, my name is Christian Hoftstetter. I'm a leadership and team coach based in Switzerland. I'm super passionate about creating space for humans, for teams to grow, to develop. So I work with organizations, with teams and leaders in my day-to-day business. And like Simon, I guess we have something in common, Simon. I started my career also as a product owner.
There is something we need to explore a bit. All right, so let's start with a typical situation which we could encounter as somebody who works on a Scrum team as a product owner, Scrum Master, or developer. Now, this picture should be a typical situation which you encounter in one of the Scrum events. Like you see, there's a lot to it, and I would like to share some examples what could go wrong or what we are typically experiencing in these kind of situations. So if you think about a virtual meeting, then all of a sudden somebody turns off the camera. Or when I started out my career, I entered the daily Scrum. And at the beginning, I was totally overwhelmed about all the stuff I had to do. And then I should share what I did yesterday. And the only thing I could say, no updates from my side. And then I moved to the next person. And these are some of the situations we encounter. And maybe I can share one more situation, which it was really tough in that time. I worked as a Scrum Master with a Scrum team, and one of the developer, let's call him Tony, reported, yesterday I fixed a bug and it took me the whole day. It's supposed to took me only 1 hour, but Susie forgot to document the code. It's a really crap, and I don't know why Susie is actually working for our team. Okay, this one blew my mind. At that moment, I didn't know what to say. These are some of the situations we are encountering as people in agile teams. Other responses could be in the daily Scrum, people are saying, yeah, whatever, I don't care what you just said. Or The funniest moment I realized once, a developer told me, we did rounds with the daily Scrum. So what did you do yesterday? And he said, yeah, yesterday I rebuilt the whole backend services in 15 minutes. Okay, let's move on. So in situation like that, we as Scrum Masters are a little bit in trouble, because let's have a brief look. What does success of a Scrum Master basically look like? What we are aiming for? So we are on the team. We are accountable for the Scrum team effectiveness. So effectiveness is a different to efficiency. It's not about making things faster or cheaper. It's about achieving our goals within the team. And assume you are a Scrum Master and you are accountable for Scrum team effectiveness, and then you account the situation as before, where people are turning off their cameras, they say no updates, or they blame other people for their faults. So as Scrum Masters, we are here to improve teamwork, help to improve the value the product delivers by, for instance, helping the product owner or coach the product owner on methods how to do it. And in particular, we are also here to improve the organization as a whole. That's what we are striving for, but still we are in very difficult situations and with conflicts in our team. And we would like to dig a little bit deeper into that today. And with that, I will hand over to Christian.
So just for a moment, let's park Scrum, let's park Scrum Team, and we're gonna go back a bit in time. And I want to introduce to you Dr. John Gottman. John Gottman is an American psychologist, and he was obsessed with relationships. He wanted to understand how do marriages work. So what he's done, he put couples into something that he called a love lab. So basically a glass box, more or less, and he observed them over multiple days. He observed their interactions, how they behaved, what they said, their verbal, non-verbal communication, because he was really interested in, how satisfied are they with their relationship, and kind of what makes a relationship last and what makes it kind of break apart. So in this process of observing couples in this love lab, he noticed a certain patterns, recurring patterns that appeared over and over again. So what he noticed, kind of what he called blaming, but there was defensiveness in the communication, there was contempt, or really bad intended, also stonewalling, like Simon already used this term before. And as a small side anecdote, there's a saying, I don't know if it's actually true, but I've been told that John, he was able to observe a couple for 5 minutes, and just using certain pointers after 5 minutes with a very high predictability, with a very high probability, you could say if this couple's gonna divorce in the next 6 to 12 months. So somehow he really understood what makes relationships work. So now let's go back to teams. So we made a detour to psychology, but now back to teams. These patterns that Gottman discovered, we can also apply them to teams. So what Gottman then offered us is basically some signals, some patterns, some symptoms that you can observe within a team to identify if there are any toxins, any toxic behavior existing in this team. And also, it's a really interesting point for dysfunctioning teams. And using these symptoms, using this language, we can develop a domain-specific language within a team. So now suddenly we know kind of somebody just constantly kind of criticizing a approach or a technology choice. So now as a team, we know, oh, we call this chronic criticalness. So now we have a label for it.
Let's bring a couple of examples back, what I shared at the beginning. So we have a label for chronic criticalness. If you think about the situation I shared where the developer said, okay, fixing this bug typically would take me 1 hour, but I had to work the whole day because the code was badly documented and why Susie is still on the team. I would say this is attacking aggressively, for instance. And the other example, what we had is turn off the camera, or in the daily Scrum, just say there was no update day after day. I would say there could be avoiding. What do you think? What we could use here?
Eye rolling. So eye rolling is something that I notice many times. It's kind of hard, I would say, in virtual environments, but I also notice a lot of kind of this eye rolling in physical, where somebody's saying something and then there's like this person just kind of rolling their eyes. Or another pattern that I'm noticing when I work with teams is withholding, just basically kind of leaning back and withholding relevant information, maybe for a decision. So these are tools that I notice and observe quite a lot. So one might say, like, now we talk about it in a very negative way. So there's okay, these team toxins are bad, but actually, if we look at it from a systems perspective, from a psychological perspective, these are just strategies that we as human beings we use to prevent us from being overwhelmed, from feeling anxiety in the moment based on certain experiences we had in the past and some fears we are having. And at the same time, we do it in a not very skillful way. So part of this process, part of this dialogue with the team is that, hey, these team toxins, they are actually trying to be helpful, but they do it in such a way that actually it's very toxic to the whole team. It's very toxic to the whole dynamic. It's very kind of toxic also to the trust within the team. So this is an important conversation to have, to point out how is it trying to help. Oh, there's actually positive intention behind when I bring in sarcasm. So maybe sarcasm is just my way of handling frustration, of handling overwhelm with problems within the teams, within the organizations, or maybe with the manager.
Yeah, let's pick the example from before. I would say the developer who told us in the daily Scrum that yesterday he rebuilt the whole backend services. And by the way, we had 3 teams working on that web app, so it was a huge endeavor. I think that was his way to point something out to us. And the same thing if we, when I started out my career, in the first week, I was one of the developers of the teams, and I always reported in the daily Scrum and no updates because I was totally overwhelmed. So much new technology, so many open problems, and I was not skilled on how to slice work smaller to make it more manageable. Then I had to step up in the daily Scrum, and it was really, oh, I'm fearing it. So I said, oh, I don't know. I have no updates. I think
I can also bring in some of my personal examples, so how I behave. So one of my toxins is my go-to toxin, and this is also something that that I talk about with teams around these team toxins. Like, what is your go-to? Kind of, what is your standard strategy when you feel this overwhelm? And for me, it's like I fade away. I go in the background, especially if there's a heated conflict going on. I notice how I'm fading away. So then when we have understanding in a team, like, hey, actually, there's something that we can do about it. And this is where antidotes come into the game. So antidotes is basically because what I often notice then as a team is now the question, okay, we understand that, right? So we understand team toxins, we understand the symptoms, we understand how it's trying to solve. I see how I contribute to the dynamics, how I contribute maybe also to this toxic behavior. But what should we do now? And there is a very helpful to have some ideas, so some inspiration as a starting point. And this is where these antidotes are very, very useful. For example, just picking one out of these antidotes is feed forward. So I usually work with leadership teams. So there's also a lot of negativity and always problems. And rather than just kind of stating what is wrong, I'm introducing a feed forward strategy. So rather saying what is wrong, you state what you need. And a very cool liberating structure. So by the way, I love liberating structures. Simon knows that, is WinFi. So what I need from you. So this is basically a really cool strategy or structure also to practice then with the team to state needs towards each other. Hey, Simon, I need from you that we practice this webinar before. And then you have the option to say yes, you can say no, or you can come up with a counter offer. And this is what you did, right? But it's explicit communication rather than just to blaming, I don't have enough time, we should prepare. I state my needs. So this is one way I introduce antidotes and also kind of very tangibly use them. Another approach, again, especially in a I use it in leadership teams, but it works also in dev in any Scrum team. It doesn't matter on which part of the organization, is transparency. So, and what means transparency is really kind of, we have also this term in Scrum, but what means transparency? It means I am transparent about my intention. So when I say something or when I ask something, I append, I share the intention that comes with it. For example, I'm saying this because, or I am asking this question now because, and this way I'm also preventing that somebody could misinterpret or I reduce the probability that somebody is misinterpreting my statement in a sense. So I'm really transparent. I'm sharing quite a lot about how I perceive reality.
Great. Should we make another example? So let's apply what we learned so far. So we have the symptoms for toxic behavior. I will provide one, and together we try to figure out how we can replace this ineffective behavior. So a while ago, I had a developer. It was really interesting, and he reported again daily Scrum. So I think it's to make it a little bit more explicit for the people. So in the sprint planning, at the beginning of the sprint, we were looking for the sprint goal, and then we were discussing, okay, which items would contribute. And after we have had an idea which items should be picked in the sprint, the developers start breaking down stuff in smaller, more manageable pieces. They call it task. And then the day after, and the second day of the sprint, they were running a daily Scrum, and one developer reported, yeah, I'm not done with this task XYZ. And the thing is, I did not estimate the task wrong, okay, because the day before they were roughly estimating so how much we can start working on today. I did not estimate the task wrong, but I was interrupted so often. So that was interesting. So he said, I was not estimating it wrongly yesterday. I am interrupted so often. So what would you say, which toxic behavior could that might be if you use this new language? Do you want to give a guess, Christian?
I can. Sounds to me like blaming.
Yeah, blaming or defensiveness, I would say.
So
It's
looking
not
at the chat, there's defensiveness, cutting.
Yeah, it's not my
Down,
fault.
maybe.
So the other persons are interrupting me all the time. So I cannot deliver what I'm promised in a sense. And so now if you try to replace these ineffective behavior, what could be a strategy in that situation?
Yeah.
It's difficult.
So what an antidote might be in this situation.
Yeah.
So there's two takes to it. So one is I just had to take. So maybe before I go into an answer, what is relevant here is like in the end, it's doesn't actually matter where exactly you place it. So this, I would say, is the most important thing. Like we saw now many things. I brought in blaming, I saw defensiveness, calling others down in the chat. Actually, doesn't matter so much to get it right. So this is first and foremost, this is not important, but it's a starting point. Now, what an approach would be. So maybe the 2% truth might be interesting. So okay, it has a bit of defensiveness in it, right? The statement. It has a bit of also kind of blaming it, kind of pointing because of them. But if we take the perspective of 2% truth, like, hey, what's the truth in it? What's it the truth in the statement? Or the other one is the curiosity. So, okay, hey, what could we actually do about it? Is there something that we can change? And just with an honest curiosity, without blaming, without judgment, there's a nice dialogue that we could start.
And I think that's the beauty of the idea what you're presenting here, because I I was missing that at the moment. And what happened after that is even it sounds like a defensive response. So it was not about me. I did the estimate right, but there was a lot of other stuff going on, and I was interrupted so often. The other people in the team took it personal because they thought they were interrupting him, and they said, no, so it's not my fault. I had to interrupt you because of that and that. And then they start arguing all over again. And you see where I think your ideas and the framework is very helpful to have a better way to deal with that. But at that moment, I was really, okay, now this is busting. Okay, we are going into a phase of some kind of conflict here. It was more about who is right and who is wrong, who did what and who did what not. And that's not a very productive environment to run a daily scrum or something like that.
And again, just to point out, this dialogue that we're just having here, Simon, is you want to have the same dialogue with the team. There's not the one perfect solution to the problem that you just stated. In the end, it's more that both we or kind of as the team would agree, how do we want to handle these situations?
Yes.
How do we want to handle that in a kind of moving forward? So that don't we fall into our trap of this toxic behavior.
And I think after establishing these, let's call it language, to think about conflicts, maybe like that, we can provide you 3 ideas on how we dealt with that in the past. Maybe you go ahead with the first one.
Yeah, so kind of the starting point, and we brought up this term now multiple times, is kind of we as a team, we're going to develop a shared language. And I'd like to make the example with like, if you're a software team in a Java environment, for example, everyone in this team now speaks Java in a sense as a domain-specific language. You know what is a for, you know what is private, you speak about classes. So how it's the same. So you've developed the language about Java, about your technology, about your programming language. But now in the team, you suddenly also have now terms and words. So for symptoms, for signals, for toxic behavior, but as well at the same time for alternatives. So what could we do instead? Rather than blaming, we could be curious. The second point we have is, so in a step, so when we have the language as a baseline, we can then go and look as a team, hey, what are our recurring communication patterns that show up? Oh, notice, like I'm always blaming, what was her name? So Tony blamed Susie.
Susie, yeah.
And this is what you will have if you have this conversation, and if you create that space that is quite vulnerable and but still safe, then maybe there's a chance that Tony is saying, oh, Susie, I believe I'm constantly pointing finger towards your way. And then suddenly you start this conversation, and then maybe Tony's revealing, hey, actually, it's not my intention to hurt you. It's just kind of, I'm trying to cope with the situation. And then you have this very vulnerable and very healthy dialogue. And then as a third step, and this is basically the very tangible outcome from this intervention with the team, is a team conflict protocol. So you as like I would say with a Scrum team, you most of the times have some working agreements. You state what is the desired behavior. You do the same. How do we want to be together when things get heated?
Yeah.
How do we want to be together when there's a misunderstanding, when there's open conflict, when there's blaming going on? And so you develop an agreement in the intended behavior if these situations pop up.
Yeah, and I think that's a very important point here, because we talked at the beginning briefly about the Scrum Master and how he is responsible or accountable for the Scrum team effectiveness. And this is typically something which is not handled by Scrum. Scrum advocates teams, of course, over individuals, but how we deal within teams, we have these three accountabilities to help us make decisions. Who can decide what? But how do we, within the developers, for instance, how do we navigate conflict? This is the missing part. And I think this new language helps Scrum Master to improve the team performance and the outcome of the team, to have something here. And that's the really nice tool.
So how Simon, how are you using these team toxins in a Scrum context? Can you share a bit?
Yeah, okay.
So a couple of examples, how you bring them in, how you introduce it.
Yeah, so we have the first one, what you said, a conversation. And what you typically look for, these kind of conversation, you need to create, let's call it a safe space. Because as we try to explain with the situation with Susie and Tony in the daily Scrum, you could not call it out at the moment. This would be not very helpful if people are starting to blame each other or stonewalling. And so then if you say something, also it makes it even more worse. So we look for some safe environment. And what comes to mind in a Scrum context for a safe environment? Sprint retrospective. So I was thinking about, okay, how could we introduce a communication or shared language about our communication pattern in the team? So a sprint retrospective would be an interesting way to look at it. The thing is, it's really difficult to call people out and say, okay, who blamed whom in the last sprint? Because then actually you are blaming the people and you create a blaming culture. So I was thinking, okay, how can I do it in a more safe way? And my idea at that time was a little bit ago. My idea was, okay, instead of talking about us at the moment, let's do the opposite. So let's think, what could we do to make things really worse? Like it was from the liberating structure point of view, it was an idea of TRIS. So first state, what are the things we can do to mess up everything that the team is totally busted? And then they came up with some sort of, okay, conflicts and how we talk to each other and these kind of things. And then the second question I was asking, okay, what of those things we are somehow doing already? Maybe you observed it in a different situation. And then we start talking about those elements. Okay, if you're really honest, which of those things are you doing in some slightly way?
Then we can do a confession round. The favorite part of Tris. I confess.
I confess. And now we mapped it to the 4 quadrants, what we had before, to establish a common language for that phenomenon. Now we had one example with a very brave person who said, yeah, I'm guilty. I turned off my camera, for instance. If the daily Scrum takes me so long, I'm really bored and in a bad mood, I turn it off. I'm guilty of it. But now we could create a shared language about that situation using the toxin and the 4 toxins. And we could also think about how we can replace those communication pattern with something different. And this, of course, comes up, as you said before, in team working agreements. So how do we deal with, if you are bored of the daily Scrum, it does not help you in your job and you would like to turn off your camera, what else might be helpful? And what comes to mind is like, the Elmo, enough, let's move on. Yeah, these were some kind of things which the people come up with. So instead of turning off your camera, just raise the Elmo and say, it's enough, maybe we should move on, as a question. And I think we have one more idea on how you can use the model
Yeah,
here.
maybe it's like how I introduce team toxins in teams and organizations. So one is interventions with teams during their offsite workshops or team restarts. Actually, when a team is newly formed, that from the get-go they have a common, a shared language about what is conflict, what is toxic behavior, and something else that actually is quite popular is our trainer workshops. So within my organization, I offer trainer workshops, and I would say have more than 30, 40 Scrum Masters coming together where we went through the motions so they then could go and run this intervention within their team. By the way, the picture on there, this is a workshop from, I believe from June when we were in Amsterdam for a meetup with the Liberators. And I believe we had like 30 people. And together we went through the workshop in a sense, and then they actually went back to their team, and I got some very cool feedbacks from participants who actually then kind of run this intervention with their teams and with very positive experiences and positive outcomes in a sense of trust, psychological safety, and team dynamics in general.
So you learn the workshop by attending a workshop, which you can apply directly to your team. I think that's a fantastic thing. And what we here see on this image, which I really like, is that we are actually physically stand in those quadrants. And we need to confess.
This is the interesting part of the workshop. So you need to build a bit of psychological safety, because there's a point in time where I usually ask, hey, okay, and what is your go-to toxin?
Yeah, that's the starting point, by the way. Before talking about other people's, what's your?
Yes. So this is really first start with yourself before you then kind of look at it from a team dynamic point of view.
Okay, hands down. What is yours?
My is kind of stonewalling. So I fade away, as I said earlier. I become silent, and I just say, okay, let them talk. I'm out.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what, if you mind, could you share how you try to find a alternative for fading away? What you're trying to work on at the moment?
I try to then kind of speak up in the moment and say, hey, something is not right. I feel like I'm getting bored. I feel like we're turning in circles. What do we do about it? So
Okay.
I call it out. It needs a bit of courage, actually a lot of courage, but it gets easier the more I apply it. So I've actually did it twice, at least today, in some of our workshops, and say, hey, hold on, something is not good. So I try to step into responsibility. I'll try to kind of also share my load of ownership for what's happening within the team, and just kind of speak up. What is yours? So we now spoke about mine.
Yeah, I'm one of the. I think I try to make fun of the situation. So if I feel overwhelmed, then I try to make fun of it. And it goes a little bit in direction of sarcasm. So I think that's my default. Yeah. And I was also thinking, like, if we come back to the beginning of the accountability of a Scrum Master, so responsible for the team effectiveness, and I think here is the missing piece. Now, if people are taking more ownership, as you said, or responsibility for their actions and their behaviors, I think that's a good starting point to work effective together. And to be honest, that's pretty new. So it's a very different model if the team takes ownership on the process and how we work together. Because if you think at the past, typically the team leader or somebody else told you what to do. And now within the new realm of Scrum, it's different. There's a different organizational model. And these kind of things, I think, are very important to consider for Scrum Master, because there is not that much you can rely on. You need to develop new stuff. Yeah. In terms
So
of develop new stuff and what we can learn, I think we have a couple of resources for you, if free resources, if you want to
yes,
dive a little bit deeper. Hold on. Maybe you want to.
I can start with the first one. So early this year, I tried to write up a really detailed step-by-step guide. So inspired by what Barry Overeem and the Liberators have been doing, kind of these do-it-yourself workshops. So basically free resources where anyone just can take the PDF and just go through the motion with a high success rate of kind of, succeeding. So really detailed instructions. Also, if you're kind of not facilitating every single day, if you don't feel too comfortable yet with improvising, um, there's there's a do-it-yourself workshop. Download it for free. This is the first thing. The book tips, some two really interesting books about relationships and marriages. If this is your thing, I love it. I learned so much about my partnership, my relationships in my life. So this is also something to dive into if you kind of are curious, want to learn more about systems. The third one is a meetup that Simon, myself, and Barry Overeem will facilitate and host in January, I believe on the 22nd.
Yeah.
And there it's actually a train the trainer workshop. Basically, the goal is that together we go through an adapted version of how I would run this, or Simon and I would run this with a team. And then basically you've experienced it yourself one time, so you should be able to do it yourself. This is the intention. Yeah, and the fourth point is connection. Simon, do you want to say something?
Yeah. So if you have any questions, please reach out to us. And I really want to highlight we are providing the PDF of the presentation on the Scrum.org page for this webinar. Then you can click on the links. And I think the first one is if you want to learn more about the terms which we described briefly, if you want to read stuff up. The second one is the book is if you really want to deep dive. And if you want to learn it hands-on from us and work together with us, I think the user group is the right thing to go. So I hope we have for everybody some next steps if you want to learn more about team toxins. And I think we should conclude here. And we have little bit time left. If there are some questions, maybe
Yes.
they can support us here.
Yeah, so there are some questions that are coming in. And for the audience on the Zoom here that are adding questions, if you could please add them into the Q&A and not in the chat, that would be helpful because then we are able to actually capture them. So that would be very, very helpful for me. Thank you. All right, so this first question here from Pedro. In your experience, to what extent do you believe the observed behavior stems from the influence of organizational culture, a potential shortfall in effective leadership, or a failure to adequately communicate the project's significance to the team prior to initiating the first sprint?
It's hard to bring concrete numbers, and I'm speaking from my personal experience. My hunch is 70% personal history, 30% the current organization. So I noticed your history, the stories you had. So I work with many senior engineers and engineers. I coach and mentor them. I'm hearing on leadership topics, and I'm hearing there's like, oh, remember, like there's like something that I experienced in my previous job. It was actually in a different organization where I observed this and that happening, and sometimes they weren't even kind of in it themselves, but they just saw something, and kind of based on this situation, they came to a belief about how things should be and how things are and how they should behave. So they have this kind of learned behavior, these strategies, and then they bring them with them in the team. So it's both, and at the same time, even though the personal story is very significant, also the organization culture. I can kind of speak for my experience, depending on who my boss is, what are the people around me. I feel more safe, I feel more courageous, more ready to take risks. And the more safer I feel, the less I have actually to the less my own toxic behavior comes up. Usually my toxic behavior comes up if I feel not safe. So it's both. So it's both my personal story and the organization. Simon, what's your take? What does your experience show?
Yeah, I would totally agree with you. So the thing is, what we think is true in this company, we typically take with from the last company without questioning it. And this goes back to your childhood, to be honest. Yeah, I'm totally with you. So it's something we always should work on, and it will never stop, I guess. Do we have one more question, Lindsay?
Yeah, we have a couple more. So I wasn't sure if you were adding more commentary or not.
I'm
So,
fine.
so how do you deal with team members that are crucial for the company but are not team players at all, resulting in coming late to dailies or not showing up at all, not sticking to planned tasks, making up their own rules and so forth? Sounds like they cause some of the conflict.
Oh, yeah.
Simon, you're nodding. You go first.
Yeah, I have a different thoughts. So let's look pure from a Scrum Master standpoint. I think Scrum is all about creating transparency. So to help people inspect and then based on that adapt. So first and foremost, if we think that we have these kind of people in our team, the first thing is we need to make this fact transparent. And transparency does not always mean just visibility. So we also need to find the right language to get a common understanding or the same understanding. And now, what's the right language in that situation? So one language could be we think about a skill matrix and see what the person's capable of. And maybe that's something unique. So if the person is here or not here, everything breaks down. And now we can look from a more business point of view. So what happens if he or she decides to leave the company? And if this person is gone, what happened to the rest? And what's the impact of that? And that's something you should start discuss in your team, but also if needed outside of your team. I think that's the first step. And here the critical point is not to blame, just to make transparent. Okay, we have these kind of people on the team with this kind of skill sets. And if this person or that person is leaving, basically we are missing something. And now what we should do about it. And on the long term, which I experienced, so if you can resolve that bottleneck, typically the behavior of that person also changes. And the way he understands that he is not unique anymore, he has not any additional rights. And now he starts joining the daily Scrum and so on. That's one personal story I can share. But maybe Christian, that's a topic for you as well.
No, I don't feel like I have something more valuable to add. So maybe Lindsay, we can go to the next question.
Okay, sounds good. So we touched on this a little bit, but what if one team member uses sarcasm to deal with a problem or situation, but one of the team members is impacted and that's not how they absorb things? In this case, they do not realize that this person uses sarcasm as their response. How should you handle that situation?
Again, I would bring it to the team. So I don't want to provide a solution to the answer, the problem that you just kind of posed, Lindsay, but more in a sense, this is actually what the conversation is about. So my solution would be, okay, do this intervention with the team and let's have a conversation around this behavior. If it's, and in the best case, we do it early enough so that it's not too much escalated, right? From a conflict theory point of view. But if we kind of do this intervention early and we have this conversation, it's way easier then to find ways as a team how we want to navigate it. Also, hence the title, Navigating Team Toxins, right? There's no right and wrong in that sense, but it's more like how do we as a team wanna manage, wanna handle it. And and to have this conversation is crucial. Simon, yeah, do you have
Yeah, I think like how I dealt in the past with it, it's not about that particular person. So I think we should see it as a sign. So this person tries to point something out to us, but maybe has difficulties to find the right language. Now the question is what he or she wants to point towards, and that we should be very curious and ask. So, okay, I see you want to say something. So what could be the implications, or what is missing, or whatever, and try to find the language that everybody understands. Yeah, that's something. And do not, how do I say it? I think curiosity is the most important.
This is what I wanted to say. I really love. I was kind of smiling when you shared that, because this is honest. This is true curiosity, how you show up, and kind of what my experience shows, that kind of sometimes the people that kind of are the most visible one, kind of the patient. You know, this person should go to coaching, this person should go to therapy, this person is the problem, right? This person, mostly the most sensitive person, that kind of points to something underlying. And this is where we need a lot of curiosity, also as Scrum Master, as team members, just to see, hey, what is actually that this person is trying to communicate? What is underneath there?
Yeah, I'm thinking of I think it was 2018 or 2019. I worked with a Scrum team, and we had one developer, and if it was too much, he always said, yeah, you can do it, but then I need to quit. And I need to leave the company. And there was something to it. And then we try to understand, okay, what causes you want to quit? And typically it was difficult for him to explain all the details, the technical stuff. But if you gave him some room to explain why he was now so upset, it helped. So curiosity is the thing here. To give it at least a try.
That makes a lot of sense. Awesome. So another question here. So what's an example of a conflict protocol?
Oh, that's interesting.
Great question.
I can share one. So there is, I'm not quite sure with the language, but sometimes people are saying there are productive conflict and non-productive conflict. Okay, I agree with that. But the difficult part is how to distinguish between both. And a friend of mine is also a Scrum.org trainer who told me a very interesting way of thinking about it. And if you're in a conflict situation, you try to figure out where we are. So if it's productive, so it helps the team to find new ideas. It's a little bit heated, but it's about the topic. Or is it not anymore about the topic? It's about the people. So you are right or you are wrong, not the solution is right or wrong. So how do we find out in which situation we are? And the idea he gave to me, which works really good, say, pause a moment, hold on. Okay, besides that situation, what can you say good things about the other person? Okay. And if the response is, yeah, okay, at the moment, he's a jerk, but in general, he's really nice. He's always here if I have some problems and so on, then everything is okay. But if the response is something good, nothing is good about him, I would love if he would leave the company, then you have a not productive conflict anymore. And then you should do something against it. And I think that's something you could have as a team protocol, asking these questions in a heated discussion to see where we are. And based on that, plan your intervention. That's one thing I would think about it without writing anything down or so.
And I have a second example that is also very tangible, something that we practice also in our team. So we had in the past this pattern of blaming people outside of the team.
Yeah.
And then kind of following our steps, we became aware of this pattern. So we said, okay, every time we blame, is most of the time venting. So we need to do it, but then we pause. And the next question that we're going to ask is, how are we contributing to the problem? So what is our part that this is happening out there? So how are we contributing? And this is always a very vulnerable moment, but we are embracing it as a team, and which leads to very kind of constructive conversations, because the blaming has a purpose. It's just kind of this overwhelm, this helplessness, frustration. We let it out there. And then we switch into, okay, so, and what is into responsibility and our ownership. So how are we contributing to the problem? So this is what we do.
How did you get awareness to that, let's say, step by step?
I pointed it out. So I'm also the Scrum Master of the team. And I said, hey, I noticed we have this pattern going on. And then, oh, yes, we actually do.
So what's your point, your standpoint here regarding writing stuff down? Because protocol sometimes sounds like we need to codify something.
This is my personal. We have our Confluence pages, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. It's more of I try to have introduce very few agreements and principles, and then constantly live by them and repeat them and make it part of our habit. Yeah, not going too much detail, but just kind of check-ins, also emotional stress level. How do we feel? Do we experience negative stress? How can we help each other? If there is blaming, asking the question, how do we contribute? And also the question, actually, what is the problem that we try to solve? So we have certain habits built in. We don't have it written. I believe they are definitely written down, but in the end, only a few survive, and these are the ones that we live by, and not that are not written. But this is my take on it.
And I think that's the beauty of Scrum, because in the moment you're not seeing that kind of stuff. But if you are step back and look at the situation again, which is the sprint retrospective, which enable us to learn again, then you see those patterns, and then you have a shared understanding of it. And now if you apply Team Toxin, the language, then we have something really to talk about the thing. And I don't think you need to write down everything, but you need to talk about it as a team, as a group. So what happened, what was our reaction, and so on, to learn from it for the next time, because then it's something you can reference back.
And kind of after such an intervention like a Team Toxin, if you do a longer retro on this topic, then maybe, I don't know, 5-10 sprints later on, you do another retrospective. Actually, how are we living up to what we kind of talked about? So it's a very easy question, and the conversation it's way more than important than actually having it written down, in my opinion.
All right, Lindsay, I think we deep dived somewhere.
Maybe you can pull us out.
So let's reel it back in with one more question here. We might have time for two. We'll see. So for those Agilists who don't have the technical background, I had developers say that it's just too technical for you to understand, and that's why it took so much time. What are some examples of what has worked for you in the past with this type of behavior? It's not very nice.
No, it's not. All right.
Thoughts?
Yeah, I have some ideas.
Okay, go ahead, Simon. I have nothing constructive coming to my mind.
So the first thing I would say, yep, I'm curious. Please explain me what I need to know. So educate me. But we need to be very careful with that, because now we could point out to a flaw or failure of the other person. Because if he or she realizes that he's not able to explain technical stuff in a very easy language, so that's the question, if he really understood it himself. So we need to be very careful here. So I would be, but I would love to learn the technical stuff. I would go that direction. And to be honest, I would never question technical answers. It's not our job as Scrum Master, so I would take it for granted. I would try to protect the team, and whatever the team thinks that's it. But I'm always love to learn, and I would communicate it. But I also experienced that in the past, not with technical stuff, but with very security related stuff, which I have no idea about.
From a coaching point of view, the questions that I'm asking myself, okay, this is a strategy, actually, a strategy of this person to say something, to protect from something. And this is probably something very, very personal. So I would be curious about that. And there, I would say tread very lightly, because there's a good chance that the whole identity of this person is tied around, or might be tied around, like, to be an expert, to be smart, to know things. And there I would be very mindful, because this person is just trying to protect themselves in a sense. So there again, curiosity. I would be curious in a sense, very on the human, kind of look at what is this human being trying to communicate.
Yeah, and that's also interesting, Christian, because now we can make up a lot of stuff. So like, for instance, in the past, the Scrum Master could be more like a former project manager who really was like pushing on, I don't know, estimates or something like that. And that's the default response from the team now. It's not about, the stuff is not for you. Yeah, that's really, it's a hard topic.
It is. Okay, so I think that's all the time that we really have for questions. However, there are some open questions here. I will share them with Simon and Christian after this, and then we'll figure out a way to address them. And
yeah, maybe also, Lindsay, if people are still have unanswered question, which I think also you can connect to us via LinkedIn and shoot your questions directly. We try to answer them.
Yes, that is a great way to do that.
Mhm.
So please connect with them on LinkedIn for that.
Yes.
Okay, so if you could just flip to the closing slides, that would be great. So we always want you to continue your learning at Scrum.org, as I mentioned in the beginning. So please feel free to check out the free resources on our website, including some learning paths that we have. And next slide, please.
Yep.
And please stay connected with us as well on our social media channels. Our forum is a great place to post questions as well. We have our blog. Simon has written quite a few blogs on our blog as well. And we also have our Scrum Pulse podcast series. This is a part of a series. We run these sessions 2 or 3 times a month. We also have an Ask a PST series where you can join and ask your questions to PSTs, and in just a straightforward Q&A session. We have one coming up next week. So please feel free to check that out on our website. And any closing words for you, Christian or Simon?
Thank you, Lindsay, for having us. It was a pleasure, and with kind of have this webinar with the Scrum.org community. It was very exciting. Yeah.
And thank you for showing up and asking so much questions. I think we see something important here, that a lot of people want to know or learn more about conflicts. I hope we can in the future provide you some more informations and helpful resources. Until then, see you next time.
Yeah,
Bye
thank you
bye. Scrum
everyone,
on.
and Scrum on.